So today, let's talk a little bit about the Olympus 300mm f4 Pro lens. And why have I got it? Well, Sue wanted to buy me a kind of special birthday present, and she said, what would you like? I said, there's nothing I need, obviously. She said, no, what would you really, really like? And I said, okay, there's a lens that I've been thinking about for quite a while. And I said, you know, I wouldn't normally buy this lens because it's very expensive and perhaps it's quite a specific kind of focal length. So she went about buying me this lens, and the one I have in my hand here is actually my third attempt, or our third attempt to buy the lens. Initially, I mean, firstly, I have to say there are quite a few of these about on the market second hand. I think people seem to buy them but don't keep them. Maybe they find it's too much of a restriction having a single prime that's 300mm, or I don't know. And it's a lot of money to tie up in a lens. But for whatever reason, there seem to be quite a lot of them around. And I thought MPB would be the place to perhaps select one from. So we selected one from MPB. Sue bought it for me, and when it arrived, it was supposed to be a good condition lens, so that's not perfect, you know, could be some marks on the body, that sort of thing. However, the one that arrived had a very obvious scratch on the centre of the front element, which I wasn't very pleased about, so that went back. They replaced it. Their customer service is always, you know, of no fault with that whatsoever. So the second lens they sent had a very noisy autofocus motor, which was also, it seemed to be very sticky on focus, so it would jerk, and you could actually feel it jerking the camera backwards and forwards as it focused. So there was something not right with that one either. So that one went back to MPB. At that point, they asked me if I wanted another one to replace it, and I said no, because I guess for me, by that point, I'd kind of lost faith in their ability to deliver me a truly good lens. They should be testing this stuff before they send it out, not relying on me testing it and then sending it back. So I lost faith in the process a bit there and decided to take a refund and go to trusted, or my old trusted, eBay. So I found someone selling what was described as a mint lens with original box, all the packaging, the bag it comes in, all the stuff, everything, all the bits and pieces, mint condition. This is it. I think it's behaving perfectly, and it really is mint condition. So, problem solved. I now have the lens, and having taken it out and used it a few times now, did a bit of testing in the garden and stuff, as you always do, but it's had 3 proper tryouts now at 3 race meetings. I went to Donington Park to watch World Superbikes. I went to Brands Hatch for British Superbikes, and this weekend just gone was Thruxton British Superbikes. So how has it been, and has it made me a better photographer? I think we know the answer to that one. No, it hasn't made me a better photographer, but in some situations it is giving me opportunities that don't exist without this kind of focal length. General handling of this on the camera, I'll put it on the camera now. It's quite, you know, it does make it quite a big thing, there's no doubt about it. One thing that I do like with this lens hood locks into place. You pull it out and you lock it, and One reason that's really important for me is having a good lock-in position, a solid lens hood, is that when I'm at the circuit, the way I hold the camera is like that, right at the, so I hold the end of when panning, I hold the end of the hood so that I can actually stabilise the end of the lens rather than any other piece. I used to hold the lens like this, but actually it's too waggly. Holding it at the end and pressing it right up tight against your face gives you a much more secure platform from which to pan. The other thing I have been doing, and I hadn't had before, I have been using a monopod attached to the foot, and that's been quite good as well. But equally, when I was on a monopod, I tend to use it like that, in the same way. So it's on a monopod, but just to hold it stably up there. I've not really got used to the monopod thing yet. I'm still practicing with that. But on the whole, although this turns out to be quite a heavy, it's quite a heavy piece of apparatus once you've got a lens this size on the Olympus, it still feels okay. It's good. My arm aches by the end of the day, but what can you do, huh? So how did we get on at the 3 venues that I went to? Looking at Brands Hatch first, although chronologically it wasn't. But anyway, Brands Hatch first. And for this particular lens, there are certainly plenty of circumstances at Brands Hatch where it's too long. One of my favourite kind of viewing areas is around Druids Bend, and you can actually get quite close to Druids, particularly if you're on the inside of the curve, and it's too long for that. I think too long. I've got some notes here about the different places, so I will go through some images now, and all of the images that you'll see here are taken with this lens, with the 300mm. So at Druids, one of my favourite locations, you've kind of got the entry to Druids as they come up over the hill, which I think is a phenomenal place to take pictures. I think it's a great viewpoint, but you do lose contrast a little bit because you're on the wrong side of the fence. There's a lot of fencing at Brands Hatch. That's one of the downsides of Brands. Beautiful circuit, great location, but a lot of fencing. However, on practice days particularly, you can get access to the roof of it's a bar. There's a bar on the outside of Druids, and you can get access to the roof. And from there, you can actually use the 300mm for bikes coming kind of into the apex, which is pretty good. And the other place is, if you're on the outside of Druids, if you're by the marshal's post, you can see straight across the track. You get a good view of the bikes from the back end as they begin to exit Druids. They're pretty much at the apex, but they're on the way out of the corner. So that's good. So there are even at Druids, where you're fairly close to the action, there are a number of places where this lens comes in really useful. I did go out onto the long circuit to Hawthorne Bend, and I took one of my favourite photos from the day there. But goodness me, it's fast at that point of the circuit. It's a really fast bend. And you're sighted quite late, so you don't see the bikes until it's almost too late to pick them up and pan. So I think it's a really, really challenging place to take photos. But I did get what I consider to be one of my favourite photos from the day there. So Clark Curve is another place where it's a fast curve and you're quite a long way from the action. So this lens can give you some nice kind of shots that are not too tight on the bike and the rider, but give you a little bit more of the background. So that's quite good. There's an opportunity there. And Paddock Hill Bend is another place where you can walk up onto the banking away from the track itself, but you end up being quite a long way from the track, so a long lens is required there. I will try this lens with the MC14 and MC20 teleconverters, but I haven't really experimented with that very much yet at all. I did put the MC20 on the camera, but it's really difficult to hold it stable when you've got, you know, what is effectively then a kind of a 600mm lens. No, it's a 1200mm lens because you've doubled it again. So it's, you know, really, really difficult to hold the thing steady. So we'll come back to that on another occasion. So Brands was on this occasion was good, but I didn't do every opportunity on the circuit. There's some places I didn't cover, which I think, you know, there may still be some even more. There may be even more to come out at Brands. Donington Park. Wow, Donington. It's quite, compared to Brands Hatch, you are in some places you're quite a long way from the track, but there's not so much fencing, so you can get to the inside of the circuit, and there's this whole kind, after the start finish line, there's this sort of Redgate Hollywood section going into Craner Curves and the old hairpin, and it's ideal for panning. You can, you know, it doesn't matter that you're quite a long way from the track if you've got a long lens. Really good for panning. Unfortunately, the weather when I was at Donington Park was really gloomy. It had been drizzling and raining on the way up there, on the drive up, and it was really heavy overcast. So the lighting wasn't great. So some of these images, I kind of feel that, you know, yeah, they could be better. But you know, that I felt they came out. I'm pleased with how they came out, but the lighting wasn't great at all. So I've just done the best I could. There are plenty of other places at Donington where I felt I could make good use of this long lens. Starkey's Bridge, a bit of atmospheric stuff going into Coppice, some arty stuff there. Fogarty S's, Goddard's, Melbourne Hairpin, all places where I think you could get some really good action shots with this particular lens. So yeah, the whole thing seemed to work really, really well at Donington, and I look forward to going back up there again, hopefully in better weather at some point. Last venue I went to, which was this weekend just gone, was Thruxton. Thruxton is a bit, in some respects, it's a bit kind of Brands Hatchy in that there are places where you're quite close to the action, but there's some fencing. There are some other places, particularly after the bikes come out of Allard, which is a really fast first corner, and they go to a place called Green and then towards Campbell. This bit called Green is kind of, it's a slight left-hand curve, and it's really fast, slightly uphill for the riders. And again, it's one of these places where you can do some panning shots, but the bikes are so fast, and you do get a little bit of time to see them coming, but a lot of it's behind fencing, so it's quite challenging again. There's a complex which is kind of Campbell and Cobb going off into Seagrave, and that's not a bad place. That's not a bad place to do some photography there with a long lens. And then there's the Club Chicane. This, coming into the Club Chicane, you've got some options, you know, about your viewpoint there. I think actually one of my favourite images from Thruxton was the very first picture I took when I got there early in the morning. And it's in this really fast piece called Green, and I was amazed at how well that came out. First shot of the day, I don't know, I must have been on my game straight away there, because really pleased with that one. So, I've had some really successful stuff, I think, there with this lens. How have I found it? You know, what would I say about this lens in summary, in my experiences so far, is that this lens in combination with the 40-150 Pro and the MC14, MC20, you know, if you've got those two lenses and two converters, I don't see what else you'd ever need, really. In in terms of working at circuits or photographing at circuits. Obviously, I'm on the wrong side of the fencing all the time. Don't have media pass or anything like that, which would be lovely. But I don't know what else I would need. I mean, it really fits the bill nicely for me. It's really good for me. Love the lens hood. It's a great locking lens hood. That's really good. It does all the things you'd expect of an expensive lens like this. The manual focus clutch is great. I use that a little bit. You can set the focus distance to restrict it so it's not hunting and stuff like that. I've found it to be pretty good, to be honest. The only situations where it really struggled, rather than it being me struggling, was when you've got bikes coming towards you really quickly, and I think that's just the camera not being able to, autofocus does have its limitations. One point I should make is that I don't use autofocus tracking at all. I use continuous autofocus when I'm doing bike photography, but I find the tracking, I've tried to use it. I did try to use it with this lens, particularly at Thruxton. I was trying it out. It didn't really work at all. Not as well as just continuous autofocus. The tracking it's a bit all over the place. It says it's locked it and it's tracking it, and then when you look at the results, they're blurred. So I don't know what goes on with the tracking thing. I don't think people think it's that reliable. Maybe for some things, but maybe bikes are just a bit too quick. I think the only real cons I've found with this lens, I mean, it is a little bit heavy. Obviously, it's fixed focal length, so you don't have the flexibility you have with a zoom. And other than that, the cost of the thing is a bit prohibitive, should I say. I paid just over £1,500 for this one, which I'm really pleased with it being in mint condition and all that sort of stuff, and that's cheaper than at the dealers, so no complaints from me there. But that's a lot of money for me to pay for a lens. There'll be more, I'm sure, on this lens in the future. And one thing that I haven't tried yet, but would be really interested to try, is the 40-150 with the MC20, taking that out to, taking the 150 out to 300 versus, and of course that would then take that, because that's an f2.8 lens, that would take that to f4, and it would be interesting to compare it with this lens directly and see what the image quality is like, whether this would be better. You'd assume it would be, because a teleconverter's probably never a good thing to put in the light path, but that'll be interesting to take a look at, and we'll do that at some point, maybe.